All right, well, good morning. I'm glad all of you are still here. Did everyone have a fun Halloween? I ate so much candy. I don't even want to look at it. Like, I brought you guys some candy because it felt rude. Like, I brought my other classes candy, so I brought some for you. And I don't even want to look at it. Like, I think I made myself sick yesterday. I ate so much candy. And now I get to move on. My children this morning were running through the house singing Jingle Bells. I'm like, you guys skipped a holiday. They're like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. Like, all morning then. I don't know if you've ever heard Jingle Cats. It's like Christmas songs sung by cats. It's like a 9th level of hell, really. My kids were running through the house like meowing Christmas music this morning. So we apparently have moved on. Like, my partner's like, take down the Halloween stuff, put up the Christmas stuff. I'm like let it sit for a day, right? But anyway, I took a picture here to share with all of you. So my kids dressed up. I think they looked really cute. I dressed up too. I came yesterday dressed up, right? But my youngest was a dragon. My middle was a cat witch, and then a clown, and they got so much candy. And I was such a good parent because I sampled all of it and made sure all of it was safe, right? I ate, like I said, enough candy for like 12 people yesterday. So I'm not going to eat any candy today. And then by tomorrow, I'll be ready to have it again. And I need like a detox of candy day. So anyway, did anyone else dress up? Anybody? Yeah, what'd you dress up as? Han Solo? Oh, I love it. What were you? Oh, that's right. Oh, did you take pictures? You have to show me after. I want to see pictures. Right. I'm showing you mine. No, you didn't take pictures? How dare you? Okay, good. Anybody else? Anybody else dress up? It was, I was saying a few minutes ago, it was crazy. We normally get very few, I live in Simi. We normally get very few trick-or-treaters, but I made this massive like tunnel, and I really went all out on our yard this year. Like, it took me like 3 weeks to do our yard, and we had like 300 trick-or-treaters yesterday. Normally we get like 20, and so my kids were like, why are there so many people? Like, people drove up to our house. It was pretty cool. So that made my like whole week. Everybody would drive up and be like, this is so cool, take pictures in our tunnel. And it just, I made the Halloween list. I've been trying to make the Halloween list for like yard decorations for 5 years. And I made it this year. So I felt like a big deal. Right now, I won't make it for Christmas. Christmas is too competitive, but Halloween, I was very excited to make the list. Anyway, I'll move forward. It's very exciting. I had to share that with you. But another thought that left me, like I said, I brought some candy for all of you. If you're not candied out, I will pass that around. You please help yourself. It's not too early. I mean, yesterday I had already had like 12 pieces by this time. Like I said, today I don't even want to look at it. I have things I just want to share really quickly, and then we'll get into chapter 12. I graded all of your papers, unless you emailed it to me late, in which case I haven't gotten through those yet. But I did grade all of your papers. So hopefully you saw your scores for those. A lot of you got 40 out of 40. The biggest reason people lost points was not giving me an academic source. So there were, I want to say maybe about 10 of you who gave me like a .com or a .org kind of source. So you lost a few points for that. But most of you did really well, right? Great starts to your papers. So make sure you keep thinking about it. The final paper is due after Thanksgiving break. So the 29th. It's November now, right? So it's going to go fast from here. It always feels like it just flies after Halloween. So you have about a month before the final paper is due. We'll talk about APA formatting. We'll build up to it a little bit. But I did grade all of those, so make sure you see your score. I also graded all of the exams. And again, most of you did really well. Just a little bit of perspective here. So with exam number 2, the high score was 100. Right, there were 2 people who got 100, which is fantastic. The low score was a 61. The average was an 89.2. And the amount of time people took 61 minutes and 14 seconds was the average. So plenty of time, really good scores. There were a lot of A's. So hopefully most of you are feeling really good about your grade at the moment. We do have one more test to go. Thank you. So we're in our last third of the class. Again, it's November today, right? Dia de los Muertos today. But we fly through this last bit. So we have schizophrenia, which will start today. And if you notice, we skipped chapter 11 for now. I have a guest speaker that I'm working with to come in on chapter 11. And so I kind of pushed it back because I'm waiting for that person to confirm with me. So we're doing chapter 12 on schizophrenia. Then we'll move to personality disorders, childhood disorders, aging disorders, and forensic psychology. So those are our topics for the rest of the semester. And we do have that final paper and one more exam. So still lots of points left to go. But again, continue using these as a learning opportunity. If you feel really good about your score, then keep doing the same thing through this last third. If you wish you had done a little better, change things up. But a lot of you should feel really, really good. Lots and lots of A's on that test. So it's fantastic. Are there any questions about the exam, the paper, any of like kind of housekeeping kind of stuff before we talk about schizophrenia today? Okay, so we'll get into chapter 12, and again, stay, we're kind of holding off for a little bit here on chapter 11. So chapter 12 and schizophrenia, I'm turn this down a little bit, it seems like it might be hard to see. Is that a little better? What we'll look at today is some of the symptoms of schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is probably the most severe of all the disorders that we've covered so far. So we've covered a lot of disorders that we could describe as neurotic, right? Where people have a hard time managing. And it's the first one that we've really talked about. A psychosis, or a psychotic disorder, means that somebody has lost contact or touch with reality. And due to the nature of this disorder, it makes it very difficult for people to stay in contact with reality, to live a normal, typical life when you're hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there or having false beliefs about reality. The symptoms of this disorder are usually quite severe. And there's a lot of like strange perception, disturbed thinking, unusual emotions, motor abnormalities. There are quite a few different symptoms of schizophrenia. And it's interesting, in the previous DSM, so the DSM-4, that was revised multiple times. In the DSM-4, we had 5 different types of schizophrenia. We used to specify what type you had based on what kind of symptoms. Now there's just one diagnosis, which is schizophrenia, but there are just an incredible number of symptoms, and that's what we'll focus on today. The 3 main categories, which are positive, negative, and psychomotor. But with this disorder, again, we're looking at somebody who has lost contact with reality, definitely a severe disorder that requires treatment, often medication, and we'll go through those symptoms. So I have a little video that introduces this really nicely that I'd like to play for you. Symptoms in him. It's a nice introduction if you've never known or encountered anybody who has schizophrenia. Right, you see him spinning his hair constantly, right? That's that psychomotor agitation, kind of a strange psychomotor repetitive movement. He says a lot of kind of random stuff, right? Like, again, the picture has a headache, and then he goes to talk about like sperm and egg meeting and fusion and get dried out and get a job in a bakery and go to medical school. His thoughts are just kind of all over the place. That's very typical of schizophrenia, having disorganized thinking, kind of strange perceptions, odd movements. As I said, there's just a ton of different symptoms that go with this. And that's where we'll go from here, right? The positive symptoms, the negative symptoms, and the psychomotor ones. But this is I won't say an uncommon disorder. It affects about 1 out of 100 people, men and women pretty equally. And it tends to be something that starts in like the 20s to 30s, though it can start in childhood, pretty rare in childhood. And it's hard to tell from just kind of normal childhood behavior. Children oftentimes will have imaginary friends and say strange stuff. And so it can be difficult to know if they're just being creative and childlike or if they have something else going on. Like my daughter, Emma, like a month and a half ago, she said, there's a woman in the corner of my room and she tells me to do things. And I was like, I'm sorry, wait, what? Say that again, right? And she's like, there's an old woman in the corner of my room and she talks to me at night. And I was like, okay, well, we're moving, right? I've seen too many scary movies. I'm like, we're out of here. Like, our house is haunted. Like, we're out. And I was like, how long has she been there? She's like, oh, for a while, like a couple of years. Like, wait, what? Like, can you describe her? Yeah, she's wearing a hat and she has like gray hair, like, and like kids say this kind of stuff. Like my instant thought is like, our house is haunted, it's a demon, right? Like, but like, is it something like this? Is it an imaginary friend? Is she just being creative? My daughter likes to tell a lot of tall tales, to say the least. I mean, children say odd stuff like that, but this can happen in childhood where people have, schizophrenia like symptoms. It's more common in like the 20s and 30s, so a little bit older. All right, so positive symptoms, positive, negative, and psychomotor symptoms. And psychology loves to do this. Positive doesn't mean good. Like these aren't the good symptoms of schizophrenia. Positive means additions, right? These are the things that are in excess of or additions to normal thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And by far, these are the most common. The positive symptoms happen a lot. There are a lot of these that occur in schizophrenia. They can be a little bit traumatic. They make life difficult. They make it difficult to stay in touch with reality. The first one that's up here are delusions. Delusions are false beliefs about reality that have no basis in facts. So they're thoughts, right? People can have delusions about all sorts of stuff, and these are very common in schizophrenia. The most common type of delusions are paranoid delusions. People think others are out to get them. You think you're being watched by the government, and the government's recording everything. They're listening all the time. There's a microphone or a camera up in that projector right now, and it's listening to me, recording everything, like people having to, like, wanting to live off the grid so that they don't have anyone, like, noticing the things that they're doing, conspiracy theories, very, very common kind of stuff. People oftentimes struggle with paranoid delusions of thinking the government or somebody's out to get them, or they're being watched or recorded. It's a difficult one because our phones are definitely listening to some degree, right? I'm sure you've all had that moment. Like I was at Legoland months back, and like the second I walked out of Legoland, it was like, thank you for visiting Legoland. I'm like, yeah, you're watching me, right? Or I'll talk about ice cream, and then I get like an email like, Baskin Robbins misses you, come back. Oh, okay. Like our phones, like they are recording. A lot of technology does pick up information, but people can go really far with this and believe kind of to the extreme that they're being watched or people are out to get them. It's by far the most common of the delusions. It's being paranoid. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So interesting question. So around like 1800 was the first recorded case of schizophrenia. Okay. At the time, it was somebody who was like unintelligible, had like strange thoughts and perceptions. I'm sure it was very common before that, but that's the first recorded case in like psychiatric literature. But in the 1800s, we actually thought it was something called demence precoce, early dementia. So in the first stages of recorded literature, we thought it was a type of dementia because people would deteriorate. But with dementia, people don't get better, right? They progressively get worse and worse. And so the term schizophrenia, I think it was 1908, was when schizophrenia was termed. And if you divide this word up, schiza and phren, it literally means a splitting of the mind. So like 1908 was when the term schizophrenia became like technically adopted by like the DSM and by psychology. But before that, we actually thought it was a type of dementia. And so there are recorded cases all the way back to like the 1800s, but it's probably been around much longer than that. A lot of like the witch hunts and things like that were probably people suffering from, delusions and hallucinations. So it's been around a long time, but this is when we started to kind of formally recognize it.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Schizophrenia degenerative in a way, like physically the brain, or is it more track?
What's interesting about schizophrenia is it has a couple of different courses it can take. Some people just get better and it goes away on its own. So we'll talk about that when we get to courses, but about 25% of people start to develop symptoms and then they never get worse. About 50% stay in that active schizophrenia and need treatment, and about 25% get schizophrenia and then it goes away. So it doesn't tend to have like a degenerative element to it. It's more related to dopamine. And so sometimes what happens is the body regulates itself, and other times people require medication to help with that regulation. So if the biggest culprit is really thought to be a couple of neurotransmitters like dopamine, but it doesn't necessarily destroy, like you might see with like Alzheimer's or a dementia, which again is why part of why we changed it, because it can actually just get better on its own. Versus Alzheimer's and the different dementias, they progress until they're ultimately fatal, unfortunately. So paranoid delusions, we talk about that. Delusions of reference, another one. When people have delusions of reference, they read into things that are largely meaningless. So you take stuff that's kind of random and meaningless and you find meaning in it. I always love this because I'm looking around for like ideas, and then like once I start, I can't stop, right? So like, why is there a little thing on the wall back there? Like, why did they put it right there? What is it covering? And how come no one sat in these front desks? Like, there's got to be a pattern, like 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. Like, why, right? What's this hole on the carpet right here? See this hole? What did somebody think was under there that they were trying to dig at? Right? Like, it's patterns and everything. Now should stop and that, and then finding things like the lights right now. Turn it on. It's like almost like being in an escape room. I don't know if any of you have done an escape room before, but like sometimes the scratches on the wall are meaningful. Like there'll be a random scratch on the wall, and that's the code for like the lock, right? And sometimes I'll leave an escape room and I can't stop looking at things like, oh, that paper's crumpled right there. Like maybe that's something meaningful. But it's like that with everything when you have delusions of reference. You read into stuff that's meaningless, right? Like there's got to be a pattern in the unoccupied seats, right? Like everything is like that, where you're looking for some kind of meaning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On the wall.
Yeah.
Were supposed to be different, or they were different colors.
Yeah.
And it made like first for a block code.
Uh-huh.
But like when I was looking at them, and I was like, no way.
Yep.
But then actually it was with her, and she was like, she like started like spelling it out, and like, oh, this is like 9 and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was like, what that like. Now I felt like I was like looking at this thing.
And it's like that, but like without the context of a room where you are looking for purpose, right? And I've done 96 escape rooms at this point, right? I'm obsessed, right? I'm 4 away from 100. I'm like, I got to get going on that. But yeah, it's so hard. Like, see how there are scratches on the wall over here, like little scratches probably from the chair. But when you're in a room, like sometimes the blood smears on the wall represent like a number, or they represent something meaningful. And it's like that, but without the context, right? You're just looking constantly for things that are meaningful when it's probably random, right? And people go nuts just like with this information. They're just absolutely obsessed with it. And I have a clip of this. If you've ever seen the movie The Number 23 with Jim Carrey, he's not funny in it, so it's always a little strange to see. But in this movie, he's obsessed with the number 23. It's a delusion of reference. He relates everything back to this number. Everything, right? Everything's connected to this book he's reading, to this number that he's come up with. And so I have an example of this. There's a little bit of side plot in there. So I'm sorry if that makes when he's kind of like reaching, making it 32, which is the opposite of 23. But that's very typical of a delusion of reference, right? Connecting everything back to a number or an idea. Looking for meaning in things that are somewhat random. As a side note, you notice there's one part where his son kind of chimes in, right? He's like 23, right? And his son is kind of getting involved in it. You can sometimes end up with what is called a shared delusion. And there's a disorder called shared delusional disorder, where you can actually pull somebody else into a delusion that you have. And it's typically somebody who's very like codependent or very like suggestible in general, but you can pull somebody into a delusion and they can end up believing it as well. There was a movie, gosh, it's been probably at least a good like 10, 12 years. There was a movie called Bug. And I love creature films and like horror movies. I was like, ooh, a creature film about bugs. Like I'm in. Hopefully there's too many spiders because I'm not a big spider fan. So I went to see this movie and there's not a damn bug in the whole thing, at least not a real bug. But it was so interesting because the whole movie was about this guy who had paranoid schizophrenia. And I didn't know this going in, but the guy has paranoid schizophrenia and he has these delusions that the government is out to get him and that there are bugs everywhere. and bugs all over him at some point. He starts to believe they're in his skin, and he pulls this woman who has feelings for him into his delusion, and the two of them just go like absolutely nuts together with these delusions about bugs. It has a crazy ending. Weird movie, but interesting. It shows this kind of shared delusional disorder really, really well, and paranoid schizophrenia really well. But again, not a bug to be found, but it's still really, really interesting. Yeah.
Obsessed with 42.
42.
To the point
Yeah.
of himself. The 24th of December and like something 42.
Wow.
Or even like in other interviews with his friends, they're like, yeah, halfway to like a few months before he died, he was just talking gibberish, but like it's really talented.
Mhm.
So obsessed with this idea.
Yeah. Yeah, 42 and 23 are really common numbers that people obsess over, which is interesting. I don't really necessarily know why, but 42 and 23, I've heard a lot of, and 11, I think 11, I think it is. So sometimes people pick a random number, and that's what they have that delusion of reference around. That's wild. This can be a very impacting, disorder for people, and to take your life over that, something like that. That's obviously quite intense. I had another thought, but it left me. Maybe I'll come back. The other type of delusion, there's one more, delusions of grandeur. Right, feeling that you're someone who's very grand or important. Grandeur means like tending to view yourself as like a prominent, important figure. There's a lot of homelessness that correlates with schizophrenia. Right. And oftentimes what you'll see is somebody dressed up in like maybe a religious like kind of outfit, or like there's somebody, my class yesterday was talking about, there's someone on the PCH who dressed up like Uncle Sam and is out there like talking about spouting things off on a corner. But what you often see is someone believing that they're a religious figure, or maybe a leader or president. It doesn't have to be a positive figure. It also could be the devil, but believing that you are somebody like very important or grand, and then acting like that person, assuming that role. And very common for somebody to stand on like a street corner and be like spouting the word of God, believing that you are God himself or herself, right, whatever, and that you are able to have that role, right? Very common to have delusions. Again, it's the thoughts, it's the beliefs that are not grounded in reality, and they tend to make life really difficult because you've lost touch with reality when you're embracing these beliefs. The next one, loose associations, also pretty common. You saw that with Gerald a little bit. We sometimes call this derailment, right? It's like the train has jumped the tracks. Usually when we're having a conversation or we're thinking about things, we follow a path, right? We follow the tracks, right? We might kind of curve a little bit, but we're on like a path. When people have schizophrenia, typically what happens is they have rapid shifts from topic to topic to topic. And so it's almost like they were on a path and then the train jumps the track and they're like far off in like a corner somewhere, right? So there's not a lot of connection between the thoughts. There's also sometimes strange speech patterns that can come, called clanging or rhyming. People will like repeat words in a strange way or spell things out in an odd way. Rhyme or like repeat again things, very common, that goes with loose associations. And I have a clip of this as well. If you've seen the movie The Soloist, which is based on a true story, the main character in there has schizophrenia, and you see a lot of this, right? He just starts talking and it's just so random. And I put the subtitles on because he mumbles a lot, and Maclean is really like loosely connected. And you sometimes see that a little bit with like mania, but this tends to be more severe. And I think you can kind of get that idea from what he's saying, right? Just kind of randomly jumping all around. It's a little bit all over the place. And that's very common. The thinking patterns in schizophrenia tend to be very loose, very disorganized. And then that shows up in speech. Yeah. Yeah.
Are people with schizophrenia ever like tend to be more violent than other symptoms?
Violent, not necessarily. It can obviously happen, but it's not necessarily a hallmark of the disorder at all, right? Typically, and what you might see is they might be acting out or having like aggressive behaviors toward things that are not visible to anyone else, right? So they maybe are acting on the voices that they're hearing or the things that they're seeing, but it's not necessarily like a key element at all, the violence in any way. Okay? Like I said, homelessness is very, very common, like being kind of off the grid, but not violent. All right. Hallucinations are the most common of all symptoms of schizophrenia. Anyone know what the most common kind of hallucination in schizophrenia would be? Yeah. What was that? Yep, hearing things, right? Hearing voices, auditory, that's perfect. Something like 66% of people with schizophrenia hear voices. It's very, very common. And unfortunately, the voices oftentimes tend to be kind of menacing or negative, or prey on your insecurities. But not always, they don't have to be. But hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there is a very, very common symptom of schizophrenia. And I don't know about you, but like if people are talking around me, I have a hard time focusing. Let alone if somebody was like screaming at me in my head, I would be just so distracted that it would be hard to function. And if you were sitting there right now trying to pay attention and listen, and there are voices in your head and there are things floating around me and you don't know what's real and what isn't, you can imagine how difficult it would be to function. And that tends to be what happens with schizophrenia. People have a hard time staying in contact with other people because they don't know what's real and what isn't. One of my very first jobs, and I didn't get paid for it, but I sat in on group therapy at a psychiatric hospital in San Diego, which is now a YMCA, just so strange. But I sat in this therapy group and I was basically a runner. Like if they needed something, I'd go get it. Like they needed a person, they needed an item, I'd go get it. But I got to sit in on sessions, which was so interesting. And I was sitting in on a session of like young adults, and this was forever ago. And out of nowhere, this young woman, probably early 20s, late teens, started screaming at the corner. And she just turned and started screaming, like that little cart over there, like she just screaming at it. And we all look over and there's just like a little fake houseplant in the corner. That's all that I saw. But she saw the devil in the corner telling her to murder all of us. And she was like screaming at him, I won't do it, I can't do it. Like, stop telling me what to do. And I was like, this is so fascinating. This is why I love psychology, like right here, like what is going on? I mean, just absolutely convinced that this plant in the corner was like the devil. And this young woman had schizophrenia and would see things. And one of her hallucinations was the devil, where she would see the devil and it would tell her to do awful things. And that's why she was in there, because she kept getting into trouble for doing what the voices told her to do. So these can be very intrusive at times. But seeing and hearing things are the most common. Sometimes people even feel like things are on them, like the bugs in the movie I mentioned. But auditory hallucinations are by far the most common. Yeah. No.
It's like,
I mean, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
yeah, I know, like it was like the scene of a girl, and I guess it was like something where I was like spraying, and then I was like telling them to like kill themselves or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's, unfortunately, these voices tend to be like dark and menacing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so like the movie Smile, it's kind of, I was about to talk about it.
Sure.
But I think you should see it.
Okay.
I definitely hear your thoughts about it.
All right.
Because it kind of has, it sounds like symptoms of schizophrenia with the kind of delusions that go on with the state.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, although like it's not straight shot schizophrenia, because the delusions people share are exactly the same across each person that's inflicted with the it's haunting.
Okay.
It's kind of induced by a haunting themselves, but it's passed on by something specific.
Interesting. All right, I wrote it down. I'll have to check it out. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So, with like schizophrenia hallucinations, like if you have like the devil you to do something, like why don't you just or like is there a reason why they don't just be like, okay, if the devil is telling me to do something, I'm just doing it.
Yeah, it's oftentimes people really struggle to know what's real and what isn't. And because the disorder is the way that it is, people, I mean, it can be so oppressive that people oftentimes give into it just to make it stop. And schizophrenia is one of the more common reasons that people commit crimes that lead to like a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. The voices told me to do it, or I couldn't control the impulses because the voices were telling me to do so. Sometimes people learn to tell the difference between what's real and what isn't. A Beautiful Mind, and I have a clip from that in a minute, is another very common movie that portrays schizophrenia. And the main character learns to recognize that the people he sees are fake, like that they're hallucinations because they never age. And so in his mind, he's able to recognize that they're not real because they never change. But sometimes people aren't grounded enough in reality to know what's real and what isn't, if they have it in a very severe way. So they might give into it not knowing that it's not true. I mean, if any of you have ever hallucinated, right, from lack of sleep or a drug or whatever it might be, it can be incredibly terrifying, right? If you didn't want those hallucinations to happen, it can be quite scary, right? Even if you're just overtired, you might see shadows and things that aren't there. But medications and drugs can make you hallucinate, and sometimes you just don't know what's real and what isn't, which is terrifying. Yeah.
Kind of challenge that question, even not even with like a disability, like humans in general, because if you look like at World War II with Hitler, it was like Jews are bad, it's Jews' fault. We're in a depression because of the Jews, and then everyone's like, oh, okay, and just listen, just because it's something they were told.
Yeah.
So like, just being told something is like, by human nature, is like, oh, I probably should do that if it's an authoritarian person. If someone did that, it's like it's probably authority.
Right, at that social psych principle of obedience, you know, that people do what they're told out of fear. Like a lot of people went along with the things that Hitler said out of fear, right? If I don't do this, something bad will happen to me, or just because everyone else was doing it. We have a tendency to obey and to conform as people, which can be a little bit frightening as well, right? And that's just grounded in and like a real person saying stuff. Imagine if you don't know what's real and what isn't on top of it, right? Yeah. Yeah.
There's this time on use of this phone to check if
the hallucination thing, like if something was actually there. That's really interesting, right? As a way of checking yourself to see. Right? People can get better at recognizing that, especially if they're like higher level functioning with schizophrenia, because it's off the spectrum, of course, right? But yeah, if you can learn to recognize what's real and what isn't, that helps a lot. But it can be difficult.
Would you use this camera for like points you can see, or you look to like, is there something there?
Right. Somebody let me know, right? Yeah.
How the camera like.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, right? That's an interesting check, right? Another way of trying to tell what's real and what isn't. So I have a clip from the same movie, The Soloist. Like I said, he has a lot of auditory hallucinations, so he hears voices that aren't there. And you can see the way that they start to affect his functioning, right? It affects his ability to play with the orchestra that he's, training with, and it starts to interfere with his life. So I'll play that for you so you can kind of see what that might look like. Right there around him aren't real. And for him in the movie, eventually he's able to learn that because they never change, they can't be real. But that takes him quite a long time to actually be able to hold on to. And you can see he also has those delusions, right? He had all that stuff out in the garage, right? That he had all these conspiracy theories for. I can see them, but you can't because of the implant, and the chemicals and whatever, right? He has kind of a combination of those things, which makes it really hard to stay grounded in reality. And again, the baby was fine, right? But you see these delusions and hallucinations, probably the most common. Loose associations are also pretty common, but these positive symptoms really make it difficult for people. Yeah.
High levels.
Yeah. It's a very strong correlation between schizophrenia and like giftedness, which is kind of cruel in a way, right? Oftentimes people who have schizophrenia are very bright and very gifted. It's a very strong correlation. They don't have to be, but it happens a lot. Yeah.
So he's taking logic and more part and read the whole textbook for the class and hadn't thought that because he just couldn't mentally stay.
Interesting, man. Sadly, it's very common to have someone who's just like almost brilliant in a way, like levels of giftedness. And the guy in The Beautiful Mind was gifted. It's interesting. 13 years ago, 12 years ago, teaching this class, I had a student sat right there, where the pumpkin at the moment. I'm like, I still remember because it was very memorable. After this lecture, he came up to me, and a very bright guy, like super intelligent, quiet, but super intelligent guy. He came up to me and he's like, I'm worried that I might have schizophrenia after listening to like the stuff that you said today. And I was like, why, what would make you say that? Right. Tell me more about that. And he was like, I have a hard time knowing what's real and what isn't real. And he's like, you know, that moment when you wake up from a dream and you're not sure if you dreamt it or if it was real. He's like, I have that all day long. Or like, I won't be sure if somebody said something or not, or if something was real or not, or if I heard something or not. He's like, it's like that all the time for me. And he's like, it's been getting worse. And so I encouraged him. I went with him over to the health center and we got him connected with some like help so he could go see somebody. And it turned out he was in the early phases of schizophrenia and he got treatment and help. I mean, I never would have known he had schizophrenia. Totally like typical normal seeming guy, just quiet. And again, like very, very intelligent. And he stayed in the class, right? And he functioned all the way through it. He got on medication and he was having a hard time with that. But you know, this can be something that affects people who are more intelligent. There's a strong correlation with homelessness, with intelligence as well. And it's unfortunate, right? It can be a difficult disorder to live with, but once you get on medication, that tends to help quite a bit. And we'll talk about that more probably next class. Yeah.
So is there indication to just like suppress the hallucination?
It reduces the amount of dopamine that you have in your system, which then gets rid of the hallucinations. So it's thought a big culprit of this is too much dopamine. And so by reducing the dopamine, you reduce the symptoms of schizophrenia, especially the positive ones are very connected to dopamine. And we'll talk about that more. The last one up here, inappropriate affect. And I guarantee most of you have had this moment at some point in your life where you don't respond appropriately to something that happened. Maybe you laugh when you should have been upset, or you cry when you should be happy, right? You kind of have like an odd emotional reaction to something. When we were at Disneyland, we waited 2.5 hours for the Cars ride, and it closed like as we were literally 15 feet from getting on it. And my mother-in-law just started laughing, like hysterically. I'm like, what's wrong with you, Joker? Like, come on, stop it. Like it was like such a weird like moment. I'm like, why are you laughing hysterically? There's nothing funny about this. And she's like, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me, right? We all have those moments every now and then. But typically this is somebody who is constantly responding inappropriately. And the reason for that is they are responding to things that are private instead of things that are going on in the world around them. So maybe they're laughing at something that they see that no one else sees, or that they heard and no one else hears. Very typical, if you saw the new Joker movie, they portray him as somebody with schizophrenia, which is a really interesting variation on that character. He laughs wildly and inappropriately at things that aren't necessarily funny, right? And that's kind of a good example of this. He also hallucinates and has delusions. They really portray him as having schizophrenia, which is, again, different from the kind of classic antisocial personality portrayal of the Joker character. But this is laughing or like being upset at things that are inappropriate. You know, so you're not reacting maybe to the world around you, but more to private stuff going on in your head. So again, all of these are very, very common symptoms. They're pretty dramatic and impacting. Any other like thoughts or questions, stories, comments? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Did have like, oh, well, I have like their clothes.
Yeah.
This.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that it's like in their brain, it's like logical.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this makes sense. Obviously, this guy has the cloaking syndrome, so you
Right.
see him hiding.
Yeah. So seemingly logical, right? And that's the wild thing about this disorder is it can look so different from person to person, right? Like he didn't have loose associations, but he had pretty prominent delusions and hallucinations. And sometimes people have none of these. They only have the negative or the psychomotor stuff that we'll talk about. So this can look incredibly different from person to person. Yeah. Like a drug, you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Depression.
Mhm.
anxiety, Symptoms of schizophrenia.
Less common from those type of drugs, but more common from like hallucinogenic like drugs. So LSD is a really common like sometimes we talk about drug induced schizophrenia. So somebody would have to have a genetic predisposition to get it. And then they use the drug and it activates that predisposition. And so what can happen is somebody uses something like LSD, floods their system, affects the chemicals in their brain, and they start to experience some of this stuff, and then their brain doesn't go back and reset after.
Yeah.
It almost was like the trigger that activates what was lying there. It could also be a trauma. It doesn't even have to be a drug. It could, I mean, it's definitely possible. It's just not as common, because they don't, I mean, lithium is more like a mood stabilizer, but it does affect things like serotonin and dopamine. So it's not impossible, but it isn't as likely as like it's typically more like a very hard or intense drug that would trigger that. But it doesn't have to be. It could be something even like marijuana that triggers it, depending on the person. Yeah.
Is there any solutions to schizophrenia and
I mean, you could have both in a way. You know, you definitely can have more than one disorder. I don't think they commonly occur together. And it might appear that way, right? If somebody's kind of doing like a repetitive behavior, it might appear kind of OCD like, oh, I have to do this, otherwise something bad would happen. And so that might be something that you see. I don't think it's super common, but it definitely happens for sure. Was there another hand? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just like wondering, would that be like schizophrenic or it's just
So, and we didn't talk about it too much, but there's something called a drug-induced disorder, right? So there's substance use disorders, and then there's substance-induced disorder. Right, so if somebody takes, let's say they take LSD or like shrooms, right? They take a drug and it causes them to hallucinate, and they hallucinate only because of the drug, then we would just say that's drug use, right? But what can happen is somebody can take a drug and it can cause a permanent change in their behavior. And in that case, we might say they have drug-induced schizophrenia. The schizophrenia was brought on by the use of a drug, and it may or may not go away. It's the scary part. And so those scare tactics that parents use of like, you know, if you use this drug, you'll end up with schizophrenia, like it can happen, but you would have had to be genetically predisposed to get the disorder already. So we'll talk about that more next class, but this is called the diathesis stress perspective. The theory behind this, that you are born with a predisposition and then a drug, a trigger, an environmental event brings it to the surface, and it may or may not go away when you stop using the drug, which is kind of the frightening part.
It's almost like saying, oh, you'll go crazy or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's how it works.
I mean, it can be. The scary part is it can be. Everybody's chemistry is so different, right? Some people can use LSD and marijuana and all sorts of drugs and never have a permanent change. And other people use it once and it destroys them forever. And I think that's the frightening thing in a way about drugs, is you just don't know how you're going to respond to them. There are people who use a drug once and then they end up with schizophrenia, and it ruins and changes their whole life, which some of those scare tactics, that's where they come from, right? Yeah.
Is it like uncommon for people with bipolar disorder who are in like manic episodes to experience hallucination and then like really schizophrenic like symptoms?
They can. If you, I don't know if you've heard of there's something called schizoaffective disorder, where people have like their mania is so intense that they do hallucinate. It's not the most common, but it can happen in mania. In a manic episode, people can hallucinate if it's severe. It doesn't happen a ton, but it's definitely possible. And people can have kind of a combination of mood and schizophrenia, which we call schizoaffective disorder. There's a lot of schizophrenia-like disorders. We'll talk about a few more of them in the personality group. Schizotypal, schizoaffective, there's just a bunch of them. So usually when we add that schizo in front of it, it's that somebody's struggling with staying in contact with reality in a way. Right? Yeah.
Jury's podcast is like a line of like people who take drugs and stuff
Sure.
like that and talk about experiences. Which I just find really interesting because, like you said, like, everyone's different and they experience it. But there's one guy, he went in a sensory deprivation, like tank or whatever.
Sure.
Can't see or feel anything, kind of thing. And then he took LSD, and he said like he was like his like mind detached from his body, and he was like in space, like millions of light years away from Earth, and like just like this ethereal kind of thing. And but like does that happen sometimes? It's feel like you're separated. So
That could be like a hallucination or a delusion that you have as part of schizophrenia, sure. Or it could be, it's much more common with like the use of a drug, but it could appear either way. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in common with the things that happen when you take a hallucinogenic drug. That event and schizophrenia can look very similar. But usually what happens is that, once the drug's out of your system, it passes versus someone with schizophrenia, or it creates schizophrenia. It just keeps going, even though the drug is no longer in your system. The negative symptoms are much less dramatic, but they happen, and they happen a lot. Negative here meaning that they're deficits, so not bad, but deficits in thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Alogia, poverty of speech. Sometimes people with schizophrenia will speak very, very little. In the spirit of yesterday, Halloween, Michael Myers, right? If you've ever watched any of the Halloween movies, he never utters a word. He doesn't speak, right? You could say, and interestingly, in some of the versions, I've seen every Halloween film by everyone who's done them, because I'm kind of a Halloween nut, or a scary movie nut, but some of them take the stance that he has schizophrenia, catatonic schizophrenia. He sits there and stares out a window for 15 years, never speaking a word, right? That would be something that you would see from someone who has negative symptoms of schizophrenia. Maybe speaking very little or not at all, not moving a lot, no emotion. Flat affect is common from negative symptoms, where somebody doesn't express a lot of emotion. They're very flat, right? They don't speak a lot. They don't have a lot of emotion. Volition is like your drive and motivation to do stuff. Somebody who has a loss of volition might do very little. They might sit in a chair and stare out a window for 15 years, or not move very much, not talk very much. They don't have a desire to do much at all. And as you can imagine, if you're not speaking, you don't have a lot of emotion, and you don't have a lot of motivation, it makes it hard to be around other people. And so what happens is people withdraw, which then makes these things worse because they don't have to maintain them. It's very like cyclical in nature. Yeah.
So Michael would allergic to flat effects, but not a loss of volition.
Yeah, he definitely has a
So
volition.
withdrawal,
Yeah.
flat effect. But
Yeah.
definitely like complete opposite. Volition.
He's very driven.
Once he's unrestrained.
Yeah.
It's a lot of.
Right. Maybe too much. Right.
Yeah.
I just, yeah, right. It's those movies are so interesting because and I don't know how many of you have seen them, but in the original, like John Carpenter Halloween movies, they portray Michael Myers as like a very like supernatural character, right? Like he just is this normal kid, and then out of nowhere he murders his sister, and he goes to a psychiatric facility where he just stops speaking, and he becomes this character, right? But in the Rob Zombie version of it, they explain him as like an antisocial personality disorder. He grows up in this house that's violent, people are swearing, and he shows all these like classic signs of being a sociopath or a psychopath, and he develops into that. Some of the newer ones almost take this stance of like the mask is possessed in a way, right? Or there's like this level of like evil and possession. Really interesting movies. I used to do for Halloween like a case study on Michael Myers, but some of the clips were so inappropriately like violent and like aggressive that I stopped showing them just because I felt like I couldn't justify it. But his character, right? You could definitely say he doesn't have this, but the fact that he never speaks, And he has that very like removal from society is typical of those negative symptoms. It's interesting. He's a really interesting character. Even if you just ignore the supernatural stuff, just some of the logical stuff is interesting to think about. So again, these are way less dramatic, but they happen, right? Negative symptoms like not speaking, not a lot of emotion, not a lot of drive of volition, and then withdrawing socially. And there's one more category, but I have a clip for this. I think it'll take us, I'll be pushing our time a little bit. So maybe I'll stop here. And then what we'll do next time is we'll finish up the psychomotor symptoms. We'll talk about the course of schizophrenia, causes and treatment. And again, remember, we skipped chapter 11 for now. So we'll do 12, and then the next one will be 13 on personality disorders. And I'll make sure those slides are posted just in case we do get there next time. But again, I brought some candies. If you want some more, help yourself. Please rescue me from the candy. I really don't want it anymore. And I have so much at home between my 2 children. But have a wonderful rest of the day. And then on Thursday, we'll keep going with the rest of this.